and CEO for the Penn Station Reconstruction. This is a important event for us tonight, as this is the first time that the MTA is coming to Community Board 5 to present their plan. And we're very excited about this opportunity. Just a few words about how the meeting is going to run tonight. Jamie and Peter are going to give us a full and uninterrupted presentation of the proposal. Then members of the committees, both land use and transportation, will have the first dibs in asking questions. Then we will open up to members of the public. Members of the public will have an opportunity to make comments or ask questions, or both. We will limit the amount of time to 2 minutes. We have a very large and robust public attendance, which we're very glad and happy about, but at the same time, we need to manage the time so that we can go through this public session. We will take all the comments and questions in a row, and then Peter and Jamie will address those questions and comments at the end. So with no further delay, I will turn it to Jamie Torres-Springer of the MTA. Jamie, good evening.
Thank you very much, Leila, and thank you to the members of the community board. These committees, I mean, I think the work that the community board and members of the public involved in this have done and are doing. The dedication is really extraordinary, and it's a privilege to be able to work on behalf of the public and with all of you as stakeholders in our work on the reconstruction of Penn Station. I think I'm going to share my screen, right? Is anyone
that's the plan. Absolutely.
Scheduled to share their screen? So let me, I must admit, it seemed like a Luddite, but it's just we use Teams a lot more at the MTA these days than Zoom. So do you see the presentation?
Yes, we do.
Good. So thanks for giving us the opportunity to present and give you an update on where we stand with the design, the preliminary design for the reconstruction of Penn. This is an exciting moment, having moved into the preliminary design and preliminary engineering stage for the project. As members of this board know very well, the railroads over the last 3 or so years have converged on a master plan to fix existing Penn now for its long-suffering users. We are obviously working within the broader context of the future of transportation in the region. It's so dependent on a number of related projects, the Gateway Tunnel, clearly, the proposal for a future expansion of the station. But as those of you watching are aware, because you have a lot of background experience in this, the MTA has been charged by Governor Hochul to really focus on, while all those projects are moving forward, the reconstruction of existing Penn, and are very pleased, as I said, to have achieved a master plan with New Jersey Transit and Amtrak that we have a consensus on that enables us to move forward with that design. So that's what I wanted to give a little overview of tonight and tell you where we are. I think the thing that's exciting for us is that it's not really a question of whether to rebuild Penn, but how to rebuild it. And I know there are lots of different opinions and thoughts, and we're very open to them as we move forward. Our vision is to make the reconstructed Penn Station a modern transportation hub that functions safely and intuitively and delivers an exceptional passenger experience. But as I said, the details of that, there's lots of opportunities for input and for hard thinking as we move through design. So let me go ahead and see if I can advance my slides here. It looks like these are animated, but didn't intend it. So we begin with, and we focus on the experience and the safety of the station user. This is the busiest train station in North America by far, and it will continue to grow. Penn Station now handles more than twice the number of daily passengers that the underground station was designed for in the 1960s. As everyone knows, it was originally built 110 years ago, largely for intercity travel. but it's almost an entirely a commuter station now with, as you can see, Amtrak intercity service accounting for in the future about 5%, about 6% today of the 600,000 daily trips. And those passengers now mostly board from the great new train hall that we've built in Moynihan Station. Ridership in Penn Station, not including Moynihan or the planned expansion of the station, as you can see, is projected to increase about 15% from 2019 ridership. And I want to be clear that, while you see, that the MTA passengers become a substantially larger portion of Penn users, on the right, you can see that overall, once we include the growth that can be accommodated by Gateway and a future expansion, really all railroad passenger activity is increasing substantially. So that, that's our focus, is that existing passenger using the station. How do we think about the needs and the challenges of those commuters? Those that come from the street have trouble finding the place. We've all had that experience. The street entrances have poor visibility. They're lost in the busy midtown streetscape. There are low ceilings in many of the concourses, in addition to feeling cramped and uncomfortable. And I want to emphasize this, they don't provide a smoke reservoir above head height, so the concourses can't remain tenable long enough to get people out of the station safely. This is a basic safety issue driven by the fact that our modern fire safety codes were created after Penn was rebuilt in the 1960s. So, we're not saying it's one or the other, it's zero sum here. We have to improve the passenger experience, but addressing this question of the height in which we can create a smoke reservoir to allow tenability, which means the amount of time, at concourse level or at floor level that someone can, see clearly and not suffer from significant smoke inhalation while they egress the station. That is a very significant issue that we're focused on at the MTA as we look at a reconstruction. The station also doesn't meet ADA accessibility standards, and there are not enough stairs, escalators, and elevators to the platforms, so they can't clear fast enough, whether that's in an emergency or obviously within a day-to-day condition. Crowding in parts of the station is severe. Again, a passenger comfort issue, but also a significant safety issue that keeps us up at night. There is no daylight in the station to alleviate the subterranean rabbit warren feel, and there are not enough entrances or exits from the station. So again, the building can't be evacuated fast enough, and the distance to an exit from the center of the station exceeds the allowable distance under the building codes. So again, a regular comfort issue, but a real safety issue that, as the railroad responsible for the majority of passengers here, we are deeply concerned about. Fortunately, we have an opportunity to fix these problems. The station area is huge. It's 2 full city blocks from 33rd Street to 31st Street, 7th Avenue to 8th Avenue. But its layout today is highly inefficient because of decades of uncoordinated redevelopment by the 3 railroads. The station has 2.5 public boarding levels squeezed between street level and the train shed below, when you include the New Jersey intermediate level. Operations and building systems, which are the gray areas in this diagram, are balkanized and they're duplicated. So they account for more than half of the total station area that you see here, which squeezes public circulation. The building systems too, also in the gray areas, especially air circulation, are outdated and they don't meet modern safety and energy efficiency standards. Overall, this station is a mystifying collection of undersized, incomplete concourses, poor sight lines, confusing travel paths. And again, as I'm trying to emphasize, the layout itself is a safety issue, which hampers timely evacuation in an emergency. So we need to address this layout in order to address those issues I identified before. It's important to pause for a second. And, again, as I said, the basis for our planning and thinking is, where are the passengers coming from? Where are they going? What are their needs? And you can see here that in 2038, 70% of customers will arrive from or depart to the east and the north about equally by walking and by subway, you see at the top and the bottom. So the bulk of them are going to the East Midtown Office District, which is the largest and densest office district in the city. This is really important. Today, the split is probably closer to 80-20, but as Hudson Yards and other West Midtown sites grow out, the projection is to get to 70-30. All passengers are important, but we tend to focus quite a lot on those using the subways at Herald Square, the 1, 2, and 3, the AC&E as well. When you take all of those away and all the people that are coming in from 7th Avenue, it's really probably only about 15% in the future who are coming in from 8th Avenue. 15% is a big deal. A lot of people when you talk about 600,000 people, but our focus on addressing Penn now is on those, the vast majority of passengers. Fortunately, we have an opportunity to create the transportation benefits that we need to with a great new station, and we have a track record of doing that. New York State built Moynihan Train Hall. The MTA, as we all know, just finished the Long Island Railroad Concourse, which doubled the height and doubled the width of the east-west corridor along 33rd Street. The reason we're able to do that is that underneath 33rd Street, we had only the street itself and some utilities that were hanging down too low above it. So we're able to take that out, move the utilities up closer to the street, which meant that we can get to, I think it's 18-foot head height. That's how we doubled the height. Elsewhere in the station, and that's about 20% of the station from 7th Avenue to 8th Avenue. Elsewhere in the station, we have that second station level above. So we're not able to do exactly that. We need a different solution. You can see in the foreground, we created the new East End Gateway entrance at 33rd and 7th Avenue, which helps a lot with wayfinding. I think, when it was a big thing for me when I realized that standing at the bottom of that escalator, you can see the Empire State Building at the, out the entrance at the top, which really orients people. But what are the virtues of all these spaces? Responding to those issues I identified. They're high. The ceilings are high. Safety benefits, natural light, lots of vertical circulation, escalators, stairs, elevators, great wayfinding. So that's really points to what we can achieve with the reconstruction of the other 80% of Penn Station. So our solution developed through the master plan is a single level station because all boarding and alighting of passengers and most public facing services will be on the lower level. You see this on the right side. It means removing the intermediate level and the upper level from the station so that we get one level with lots of space. To relieve congestion, make the public safe, we're going to need a lot more circulation space on that one public level, which is the light color in this before and after. The total circulation space that we get on the lower level, you see on the right, will almost double to 240,000 square feet, which is about 4 football fields. Again, when you look at having 2 full city blocks, there's a lot of room if you manage things right. And you can see to the right, the mid-block train hall near 7th Avenue. It's the largest public area because as I noted, that's where the passengers are. That's the big light-colored area on the right side of the station. Here's a rendering of what the mid-block train hall could look like. These are all master plan renderings that I'm showing. They are conceptual, they're illustrative, we haven't been through detailed design, but they give a sense of where we can get to. So the mid-block train hall will rise through the former taxiway between Madison Square Garden and the 2 Penn building. The taxiway has been unused since 9/11. It here becomes a very significant public space in our city. It becomes the central architectural feature of the station. 70% of passengers will be or will pass through. You can see we'll have a 2-block long skylight running all the way from 33rd to 31st Street, 100 feet high once we incorporate the taxiway. The large new mid-block street entrances at each end of the atrium will improve accessibility, egress, and street visibility, but most importantly, they'll provide easily reached high-capacity exits where they're most needed. So again, sometimes people say, well, why add these entrances so close to 7th Avenue when we're trying to create entrances on 7th Avenue? We need them for people to be able to safely egress in the case of an emergency, in addition to wanting to create this central architectural feature. The train hall will be 75% larger than the areas you see here, Moynihan Train Hall and the Great Hall at Grand Central combined. That train hall will be a huge space. Another view of it, the Madison Square Garden Bridge can be reconfigured to become part of the visual composition of the train hall that maximizes daylight. we're moving into preliminary engineering now, and we're able to look more closely at that concept and what our options are, and we're excited about doing that. Here's what a new center boulevard might look like. Those of you who have suffered through being in the Hilton passageway, of course, you don't recognize this space, but this is looking from west to east down the center of the station, underneath where 32nd Street would be, the location of that hated Hilton passageway today. It's got a double height ceiling, provide clear sight lines all the way across the station. Public facing services, including retail, can be arranged intuitively around this new center boulevard. How about 8th Avenue? This is what the 8th Avenue side of the station might look like. Again, conceptual rendering. For us, the priority is creating new entrances at 31st and 33rd Street. Why is that? Well, there's no 32nd Street to the west of 7th Avenue. So we know that people entering the station from the street are either coming from downtown or uptown along 8th Avenue, or they're coming from Far West Midtown along 33rd Street or 31st Street. That's how they're getting there. So we want to make sure that we put those generous entrances in the location where people will want to enter the station. That's not to say, and we're further evaluating concepts about what to do with the Hulu Theater, but it's a real priority for us, no matter what, creating those major entrances at those corners. It's very, very important. And you can see that a treatment can enliven that too long block zone, in a variety of different ways. Another rendering on the corner entrances to both the station and Madison Square Garden. Today, those entrances are undersized and unwelcoming, but we're expanding them into the corner plazas at 33rd and 31st Streets, and we improve their functionality and their visibility. This is where we can put ADA elevators, entrances to the station. We also still showcasing the MSG drum. And again, these conceptual, but we can make a series of improvements to the way that this building or these series of buildings meet the public realm. This is an exciting opportunity that we have. So you can see the 8th Avenue side here. This is inside those entrances. We get about 15,000 square feet of public circulation in those entrances. So this is, you can see the daylight coming into the station. Obviously such a huge improvement to what we have now along 8th Avenue. A new concourse is created on the 8th Avenue end of the station for that 30% of riders who will use this end of the station or pass through it. Lots of opportunity to make improvements there. So we're excited about this plan to transform Penn into a civic space worthy of our customers in New York City. Let me tell you what happens next. We have a year or so of design, preliminary design to get through. That takes us to what we call 30% design, and puts us at the opportunity to go get into construction, whether it's early works. We're looking at how the packages get out, how we start to get the project built. We also are hoping to very soon begin the federal environmental review process. That needs to run in parallel with that design. Probably takes a little bit longer than that, but we have to get through that. And both of those processes will include stakeholder engagement. We'll have more news about how that's going to go very soon. I was mentioning we have to determine how to structure our delivery approach, our packages, and how to fill in the additional funding needs that we have during this time. And then we would move into procurement and move forward with the project. The last thing I want to emphasize is we have a real sense of urgency. We're focused on getting as much work as possible done between now and 2027. Why between now and 2027? Because we've taken some LIRR trains out of Penn and into Grand Central with the opening of Grand Central Madison this year. But we will be bringing additional service back into Penn Station with the completion of Metro North Penn access in 2027. Why is that important? Because in our work that Peter and I do, the currency is outages. Getting difficult infrastructure work done in an active system can only be done if you take tracks out of service for periods of time. And the only way we can take tracks out of service for periods of time is during that time that we have less service coming into Penn. So that's why it's such an important priority for us to, sort of wrap up some of the issues that are happening right now, and get ourselves through this preliminary design, get our environmental approvals, and get to work. So that's our vision of the future of Penn, and I think I'll stop sharing, and I'm excited to have a conversation and also hear from members of the public who are here as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jamie. I'm going to turn it to my colleague, EJ. EJ, you're going to take the first round of questions.
Thanks so much, Leila, and thanks, Jamie and Peter and everyone from MTA. I want to say thanks very much for coming to us and choosing the community board as a venue for engaging the community. We taking our questions tonight. It's a really important opportunity for the community to engage. So looking forward to the conversation. I have I think two questions maybe to kick us off, and then obviously want to open things up to other members of the community board and then members of the public as well. So my first question is in regards to kind of that process that you were talking about at the end there, Jamie, in terms of what comes next. You talked a little bit about the next year and some of the milestones you want to hit. Governor Hochul, in some public announcements, has referred as well to a design process and a design solicitation. Is there a timeline attached to that process in terms of engaging the vendors and the community in terms of outside design solicitation?
The design process is underway now, and the way that we typically get this work done, we have different stages, right? We're through a conceptual master plan. We're in what's called preliminary design. That usually takes us to, if it's helpful to think of it this way, about 30% design. And then we proceed. We have some decisions to make about exactly how to structure the future delivery. But one of the things that the MTA has been very successful with in the last few years, so it's a very good example of how we might proceed, is design build. And so you can imagine that you're bringing a team on, multidisciplinary team, and that team is responsible for completing the design to 100% and doing the construction work. So that's an example. We've used different variations on that recently. We have used, we have awarded a P3 contract. It's something we'll look at. A little skeptical of it because P3s cost more, right? We have lots of sophisticated participants in this meeting. Understand that public debt or public capital that we use to pay for our projects costs less than private equity and private debt. So, but it's still an option. But the whole point is, the rest of design, the advancement of design and construction, those happen. You want those to happen together as you get the work done. So that would be the next phase.
Just a quick follow-up, Jamie, if you will allow EJ, just to clarify. So that is to say that you will not open up to outside design at this particular juncture.
No, we have done that, Leila. We did a procurement. We did a solicitation, world-class design firms, and we did a competitive solicitation. We had a number of respondents. We went through that procurement, and we awarded a contract to the firm FX Collaborative with WSP Engineers, and they have a collaborating architect named John McCaslin, who, if folks might want to look him up. He's done great work, particularly King's Cross Station in London, which I think is actually really interesting, important precedent for what we want to do at Penn. He's also done good work in Sydney and elsewhere around the world. So that's the team. We brought them on board through that competitive solicitation, and
okay, so that phase is done and dusted. Great. Thank you. EJ, back to you.
And just to follow up on that, and you might have mentioned this a second ago, what would you say is the time frame for reaching 30%?
A year.
A year from now, essentially sometime in 2024, perhaps?
Not perhaps, for sure.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you. Thanks. So I had one other question, and then obviously want to let other members of Layla and other members of the community board ask their questions too. This might jump around in time a little bit, but it's something that I'm curious about because you mentioned specifically how the three railroads have signed on to a cohesive master plan. Presumably not just for the reconstruction, but then for the operation of the facility after it's reconstructed in a more unified way. Obviously anyone who has been a passenger in Penn Station over the last I don't know how many decades kind of has the sense that when the floor color changes, you're moving from like MTA turf to New Jersey Transit turf in terms of the maintenance and the operation and those types of things. I'm curious if the master plan contains a business structure for how a unified facility gets maintained after it gets rebuilt, with fewer, holy lines of demarcation. Is there a sense of how the resulting facility gets operated?
No, it doesn't contain a business structure. It contains the goal that you just described. Totally agree. We need a unified station. We need unified station operations. And obviously we need unified look and feel, wayfinding, right? That's what makes these stations work. And we've had good experience with getting some of that done. There's good sort of common wayfinding in Moynihan. We've been able to integrate wayfinding in Grand Central Madison. There's a couple of details to deal with, of course. Never, it's always a work in progress, but so that's there are opportunities there, but those details are to be worked out in the future.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Layla, I don't know if you have follow-up questions or other members of the committee who are in attendance, if you want to use the raise hand in Zoom.
I'm going to take the next batch, and then I'll turn it to David. I have many questions. I know I'm not going to be able to ask all of them. Just quickly on the NEPA, what level of environmental review do you expect to reach?
Peter, do you want to describe that? And for those that joined late, Peter's the project executive for Penn Reconstruction.
Sure. We're discussing that right now with the Federal Railroad Administration. The National Environmental Policy Act requires all federal agencies to do environmental study of any action that they take. The action they would be taking here is funneling grant money and loans to the three railroads to do this. So the environmental study is done by the railroads on behalf of FRA. So we're deep in discussions with FRA on how that should look and when it should start. Tentatively, we think it will be an environmental assessment, which is a type of environmental study one does when one expects the outcome would be a finding of no significant impacts. And that is what we expect here. But that's still to be decided with our partners, our federal partners.
Okay, even with the atrium, because the atrium is a major new element that obviously is, doesn't exist and has its own set of environmental impacts.
Yes, even with the atrium, we do not believe there would be any significant environmental impacts. The project is the renovation of a building. Renovations of buildings sometimes include extensions, etc. So that the fact that there is a change in the building or in the building's outward appearance in and of itself is not an environmental impact. It would have to be what the federal law defines as an environmental impact. That is, it would have some change to the surrounding community, cause some change in noise levels permanently, some change in circulation patterns of pedestrians. All those things have to be studied, and it is our expectation that there would be a finding of no significant impacts. Just to wrap up the federal process there, if one does an assessment and finds that there are impacts, then all that work is rolled over into an environmental impact statement.
Okay.
It doesn't end with, if you find impacts, it doesn't end. You have to keep going all the way into an environmental impact statement.
Got it. Okay. And just to follow up on that, and then I'll turn it to David. When is the environmental, the NEPA review going to start?
Well, we're still in conversation with our federal partners on that. We're hopeful it'll start by the end of the year, but that remains to be seen.
Okay, thank you. Turning it to David Sigmund.
Thanks, Leila, and thanks, Jamie and Peter, again for joining us. I wanted to focus on the funding aspects of the schedule. And the reason I raise this is that, there's a whole history of these large public projects in New York that take decades to get off the ground because it takes a long time for political alignment and funding to come into play. And my firm actually was a development manager for Amtrak on the Moynihan Station project in the 1980s. And it took, almost 40 years for that to get going. And we have other examples as well. So if you could focus a little bit on how you see, funding falling into place for this, given the political cycle of a presidential election in 24, gubernatorial election in 26. You mentioned, Jamie, the 27 opening because of Penn Access. How do you get through these dates and get a project of this scale funded, given that there's so many moving pieces on the political side?
Sure. It's a good question. Look, these projects are not for the faint of heart. And, we are so deeply committed to, improving the conditions in the station. That's why we're working so hard to move it forward every day. And, funding is part of that. Typically, people will have seen this when we pursue these mega projects. If you sat there and waited for all the funding to come together before moving forward, you wouldn't get them done, right? They wouldn't have the momentum, they wouldn't get done. And we've seen great success at the MTA in the last few years. Second Avenue subway, Penn Station access, Metro North Penn access. We are still awaiting the results of the federal grant process, but we're a year into construction already. We figure out how to get it done. In terms of the building blocks of it, we have a $1.3 billion in appropriated funds from the state of New York. We have a commitment that this is on the priority list for the Northeast Corridor projects. We have the current stage that we're in, which is the design stage, funded, split equally between MTA, New Jersey Transit, and Amtrak. We have funding applications in for this stage. And, look, we're at a moment when, our federal government has, led by Senator Schumer and the president have, gotten together and determined that we're going to spend more on infrastructure than we ever spent before. So there are lots of opportunities here. We have to keep this project in a position to get funded. And that will be the model. And you need to have design. I mean, you can't, with the federal government, you can only get the stage that you're in funded. So you got to get through design and get to, future funding stages. And that's what we're positioning the project for.
Just a quick follow-up, David, if you will allow me, and to you, Jamie. You said that you have applications for funding out. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, we're in the grant cycle for the stage that we're in.
And which grants are you referring to?
You know what? I don't really get into all the details because I might get it slightly wrong, and want to be careful about that. But we're confident that we're going to get federal funding for the project.
But I'm happy to follow up on that later. But can you let us know which grants you have applied to?
Sure.
Okay, great, thank you. Going to sorry, back to David. Sorry.
No, I think that covered it. It's I guess it's mostly a question of how important is it to get all of this done within the next year? Is that even feasible? And it's a very hard question to answer, and yet I guess it'll ultimately dictate the timing the project is on. Unfortunately, any change in Congress or the presidency or anything else is going to impact all of this. And so, is it feasible in your mind to get the package together within the course of the next year, given that the design process itself to get to 30% is a year?
Feasible to get quite a lot done in the next year.
Okay. Thank you. Going to Mary. Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to echo my thanks for such a great presentation. Just going back to page 13, I see a number of tall towers surrounding the project. Those aren't existing towers, are they?
I can take that one. They're not existing towers. No, they're representative of either office or residential towers that might be built in the district around it. It's just background.
Okay.
There's no
It
implication of what those will actually be.
Okay, it just seems eerily like the Vornado towers that we've already grappled with. So just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, they're just generic towers. There's no intent to say what they'll be. Just
Okay, but they would cast shadows, right? I mean, or are you just saying these are placeholders?
they're just placeholders.
It's just a rendering. We're not, yeah.
Do they render the bulk design of the GPP project?
No, they're kind of just generic. They are not specifically the bulk of the GPP. No, they're just they literally are just placeholders. There's nothing to be read into them.
Okay, thank you. Renee.
Thank you, Layla, and thank you for such a great presentation. As you approach the negotiation with MSG, would you be considering the use of condemnation power at all?
If necessary.
Okay.
If I can throw in a follow-up, can you actually share any stage of the negotiations that you're in with MSG?
I don't think I should really talk about negotiations. As folks are aware, the city is in the midst of a land use process, and had asked the railroads to opine as to whether the garden could become compatible with the station. And we said, submitted a report. I'm sure everyone here has read it, that said, yes, it can, but that it requires some significant things from the arena, and we're very hopeful that the arena decides to come to an agreement with us on that.
So we do understand, and this is something that you have stated, that at the time of the commission review, you had not entered into any significant negotiation with MSG. Has there been any progress since then?
I'm not going to comment on that tonight, Larry.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions from members of the committee? I have a few more. I'm going to try to go very quickly. The master plan, some bits of it have been released, and it looks like some reporters maybe got the document foiled. And there has been, some reporting on it, but it looks like it's a foiled version of the master plan that has some redaction. Are you going to publish the master plan?
I don't believe we made a determination on that yet, but we've certainly, put a lot of it out, and it gets somewhat supplanted by the design work that we're doing now.
What is holding you back in making the document public?
Peter, do you want to comment on that?
Oh, sure. There are three railroads work on an agreement to make all decisions together. And the railroads have not made a decision to release it. There's nothing in it that needs to be hidden in any particular way. It's all just engineering and architecture. And it put forward a series of ways we could do it and use it as the basis for selecting a way to go forward. We've made the way we plan to go forward quite public, and Jamie just did it again today, but we've done this many times. So our focus has been just on the actual reconstruction, what we've agreed upon and where it would go. Obviously, when a document's foiled, it's foiled and it's out there, and you're right, it has been foiled. We know that, so But so far, there's been no decision to release the document.
And what is the position of the MTA on releasing the document?
Well, it's been foiled, so it's out there now.
Well, it's redacted.
Yes, the redactions will remain. The
Redacted.
redactions were done by security people in the 3 railroads. That there is information about the structure of the train shed and such that's considered security sensitive,
Got it.
and those things are never published.
Okay. A follow-up question actually on the train shed. I watched the session that you did with the Rudin Center a couple of days ago. And Peter, you mentioned that you're going to do work on the train shed as well as the columns. And this is why you're going to need to take some tracks out of service. Can you speak a little more on that?
Sure.
What kind of work are you doing to the train shed?
Sure, it's all structural work. The existing building is supported by a large number of columns that go down through the train shed to foundations and rock. We're going to reconfigure the building in many very significant ways. And that will mean that certain columns will have to be removed. Their loads will have to be transferred to other existing columns or to new columns in different positions. Existing columns may have to be strengthened. Existing foundations may have to be strengthened. It's quite a lot of that'll have to be done. And just to make it clear, no matter what the final design is, we're going to have to do a whole lot of work in the train shed.
And when you say the building, are you talking about Madison Square Garden? The station, or it's basically a whole package, and you can't really decipher really, which is which. Like everything needs to be supported, I guess, right?
Yeah, there are columns that are, for instance, just supporting Madison Square Garden. There are columns that are just supporting 2 Penn Plaza. There are columns that are just supporting the train station, and there are columns that support 2 or even 3 of those elements. It was all designed together in the 1960s. The entire thing was one architect and one set of engineering firms. So they tried to be as efficient as possible. Some things are separate, some things are all integrated with each other.
Okay, and the work that you're going to be doing is going to have pretty significant impact at the platform level, right?
Yeah, well, the key impact on the platform level will be increasing the number of stairs, escalators, and elevators so that we can clear the platforms much faster than we do now, and that they would be fully accessible. I mean, there's at least 1 elevator to each platform now. Some have 2, but 1 elevator on these platforms is not enough. You can't say the platform is accessible because there's a single elevator there. It meets a legal requirement, but you can't say it's accessible, right? So we need to get a lot more of these vertical circulation elements onto the platforms. This is critical because the platforms are narrow, right? So the solution to narrow platforms is people don't spend much time on them. They don't have to walk along the length of the platform. You get out of the train and there is a vertical circulation element right within sight, right? You go straight to a stair, an elevator, an escalator that's very close to where you're getting out of the train. And that's what alleviates the problem of the narrow platforms.
Got it. Okay. Shifting gears a little bit on the design that you showed us tonight, you're proposing, and we understand it's very schematic, but you're proposing to do some sort of expansion on 8th Avenue. Would that require acquiring air rights? Are you building out the footprint of what currently exists?
We would be building out the footprint of what currently exists at the corners of 8th Avenue and 33rd and 31st Streets, which are currently plazas. Now remember, Madison Square Garden is a circle inside a square block. So at the corners, at the corners, you have open space, plazas. And we want to use that plaza space to create new and better entrances for both the station and Madison Square Garden. So there would have to be a transfer of property rights from the garden to Amtrak, presumably, as the owner of the station, so that we can do that work. And that would be an improvement both for the railroads and for Madison Square Garden.
So air rights on this block belong sort of like equally to MSG and to Vornado. Which air rights are you planning to acquire?
We would be acquiring the property that we need. what has not been negotiated is there is air rights associated with any portion of the property, but those air rights would not necessarily be transferred to the railroads. Those air rights may be held in part or completely still by Madison Square Garden. None of that's been negotiated yet. We would be negotiating to get whatever it is we need to do whatever it is we finally decide to do.
Got it. Okay. So basically based on the design that you settle in when you are, 30%, this is what you will be negotiating.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay.
We have a good idea now just from the master plan. That's why we're in negotiations now. We don't have to wait to 30% in order to reach at least a framework agreement with Madison Square Garden. But, the final agreements will require more design to reach.
Got it. Finally, on some design elements, it looks like at the west side of the station, you're proposing this sort of like Chinese pagoda style canopies all around. Are they cantilevering over the sidewalk?
Yes, that would largely cover the sidewalk, which would a benefit in terms of protecting people from weather. But mostly it's to establish a presence on 8th Avenue, right? It's a really unpleasant stretch of 8th Avenue, right? 2 blocks there with the back wall of the Hulu Theater. Everybody hates it. We hate it. The idea would be to remove the cladding on the back of the theater and replace it with something interesting and provide other interesting elements like a pavilion-like structure.
Got it. And is there any risk that the tractor trailers that load on 33rd and 31st may actually get in the way?
No, there is a problem with the loading of the former Hulu Theater, and that's still being worked on right now. The solutions are being considered and negotiated with Madison Square Garden over time. I can't tell you what the ultimate solution will be, but we have to come up with something.
Got it.
And can I just say, in our plan and in the city's intention with the special permit, there wouldn't be loading on 33rd Street and 31st Street.
For the arena itself, that's correct.
For the arena on 33rd, that's the agreement. They would still be loading on 31st, and they would still be loading the Hulu. And Hulu actually, their loading operation is incredibly intrusive because they actually have to, drive all the way onto this plaza to get to the loading bay.
Yeah, great.
Yes, that's correct. And that's an issue between the city and Madison Square Garden. We're in it only in that we want to use the plazas too. We have put forward a plan that would not block their loading entrance, but the fact that the loading causes public problem is an issue that the city is debating with Madison Square Garden now.
Yeah, got it. Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you so much. Members of the committee, David Sigmund. David, go ahead. And then we're going to open up to members of the public.
Jamie, I just wanted to focus on procurement. I know you mentioned it in the timeline. Do you feel that you need to get all the way to 30% in order to start, some kind of procurement process? If you were looking for choices like design build, operate and maintain, or that plus financing, could you see issuing some sort of like request for expressions of interest to get some of these ideas from the private sector earlier in your process and potentially earlier in the funding cycle as well?
I guess I wouldn't rule anything out, David. There's a bit of false precision to 30%. So, it's like we need to sufficiently advance design. One of the reasons that we do that work is that protecting the public, the taxpayer in this is all about how we manage risk. And so we try to take things to that level because, then you don't get, and all due respect to, it's most of my job is working with an array of contractors. But, there's sort of some, the contractor can say, legitimately, you didn't tell me about this, this, and this when I bid this job. And so, here come the change orders. And that's a business we're trying to get out of. So, and successfully so. We've been bringing projects in on time and under budget, or ahead of schedule. So it's really that approach that we make sure we do enough design. Is that exactly 30% of every single element? No, but we do try to do that to make sure we're really protecting ourselves.
But do you see, just in terms of trying to attract ideas, even before the level of, contractor bids, would you consider, I don't know what that point is, like you said, these percentages aren't necessarily hugely meaningful, but could you see by January 1st going out to the market with wherever you are conceptually in order to hear back from the private sector on how this might be structured, more broadly?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I would say we're very happy with the team that we have. They have a great, sort of very in-depth knowledge. One of the sort of virtues of the construction development agency we've created is we are in touch with, the various private sector folks constantly. So I think we'll be able to get a lot of that information, and we do. But you're right that when we do go out into procurement, there are lots of opportunities for, alternative concepts coming in from our, design build respondents, or, whatever kind of respondents we have. So that is an important opportunity as well.
Thank you. Next question actually goes to Michael. Michael, go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for joining us today and presenting the plan. I was very pleased to see how you led with safety and passenger flow, which seems to me to be a sensible place to start when renovating the station. So I was just wondering if you could explain the smoke headway a little further, and if you had any more information on sort of the actual heights on the train level, because that seems like that's going to be a huge project in and of itself. And if you could just discuss that a little more.
I took my best shot at it at my level of understanding. I defer to the expert here and ask Peter to explain further.
Thank you.
The concept here is that smoke is hot and it rises. And that's exactly what you want it to do in a fire situation. You want it to rise over people's heads. And where the people are, the first 8 feet or so of height, would remain relatively clear of smoke. The density of smoke would not be a health danger, immediate danger to people. So you can imagine that if you have 8 feet of height, you have a 1.5 to 2 feet of smoke reservoir, and then it's down into your face. Double that to 16 feet, right? Now you've got about 10 feet of reservoir up there. The difference is huge. The difference in how long you can continue to use that corridor to get out of the building is enormous. Get to 18 feet, get to 20 feet, get to 24 feet. And it's not linear. It's like, get me 4 more feet, I get a little increment of improvement. Get me to 10 feet, and I've got 4 times as much improvement. It's that kind of thing. So we want to get as much height as possible. And by the way, we need to put, HVAC ducts all over the place, right? We need headroom to put them in, right? If we can get to 24 feet everywhere, we won't have 24 feet where we have ducts, right? We'll have to hide them creatively in an inventive kind of architecture. And these ducts will be big, right? They will be quite big. So we just need a lot of space. That's the bottom line. You need a lot of space. In the train shed itself, there's no way to get more headroom. And that would conflict with our concept of having one level on that lower level right above the train shed. But the train shed is very well ventilated. There are 8 enormous fan rooms that ventilate the shed. And when they turn them all on, it's like a hurricane down there. Of course, that's deliberate because you don't have a lot of headroom. So the smoke has got to be moved out really fast. And the system that was built for the train shed can do that. And I've been down on the platforms when they've tested them and stuff. And wow, that's a lot of air moving. We can't do that in the station. I mean, it will blow people away. You need a somewhat different solution for each location. There's a good solution in place for the train shed. We need a good solution in place for the rest of the building.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. EJ.
Thanks, Layla. Yeah, I did have one more follow-up question for Jamie and Peter. You obviously talked a lot about your focus on the 70% of passengers that will be headed east from the station when they're commuting in the coming decades. And the chair of the MTA has similarly made public comments about how he didn't necessarily personally think that acquiring the Hulu Theater was a good investment. I won't necessarily ask you again about negotiations with MSG, but I am curious. I'm wondering, as you talk about the master plan tonight, whether there is any new information on MTA's assessment of the Hulu Theater, whether there was anything new to add, and whether the master plan at this point kind of allows for options on 8th Avenue, depending on how your negotiations go, or whether or not the master plan kind of just 100% assumes the former Hulu Theater stays in place in perpetuity.
Yeah, thank you. What I'd say is we've evaluated that extensively, and we're continuing to evaluate it. Actually, the three partners have agreed that we're continuing to evaluate that during this stage. So, we don't want to foreclose opportunities. I'll just, maybe somewhat repeat what Jano has said, just so that, to get it out there. The sort of offer by MSG, to buy the Hulu Theater for, I read $500 million. I read $1 billion. I read $500 million. Assume it's $500 million. We have to evaluate that from the perspective of transportation benefits. And as I hope we emphasize in the presentation, if we create a new train hall out of the Hulu Theater, it's not just the $500 million that I guess, the government ought to pay Madison Square Garden. It's just sort of hard for me to even say that, but it's also, the theater, as Peter said, everything's designed together. The theater, all of the theater's infrastructure and utilities is tied into MSG. So you have to demolish it, disconnect it all. And then you have to turn it into a train hall, which is where we come to this being $1 billion or $2 billion. And, we're trying to be responsible stewards of public money. We have significant, we're about to come out with our 20-year needs assessment as the MTA at the end of September. We have significant state of good repair needs that are required. Just one of many examples, the Grand Central train shed is in a state of disrepair and needs multi-billion dollars of investment. So when we look around, we say, okay, 70% of passengers are on the east side of the station. We can make improvements at the corner entrances on 8th Avenue, which is really where people are coming from and going. Is it worth $2 billion? Is it worth us not fixing the Grand Central train shed in order to create another train hall there by paying $500 million to Madison Square Garden? The answer to us is pretty plainly no. But as I said, we're continuing to evaluate it. And I certainly grant, there's nothing certain in this world, and we want to continue to take a look. But I just wanted to make sure you understood what sort of how we view it.
Thanks. No, I appreciate the fiscal outlook and the competing priorities, of course, when it comes to the money. To the layman such as myself, the benefits would obviously seem to be clawing back some volume, some area of public space that was lost in 1963, and then of course probably some benefit to the removal of columns on some of the west end of the platforms. But of course it's there are a lot of factors, particularly fiscal factors. But I was curious as to whether depending on whatever negotiations and whatever opportunities seem to come up, whether there was more assessment to be made. So I appreciate you kind of clarifying that also.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, EJ, I just want to say, we agree with you about reclaiming public space. The public spaces we've identified, there's no economic activity occurring on them. The taxiway, the plazas on 8th Avenue, maybe they're, it's of some value to the garden, but there'll still be entrances to the garden after we're done. So, so that's sort of, we're trying to reclaim that public space. I mean, reclaiming that taxiway is really, really important. And we, anticipate that that ought to be something much more fiscally prudent for us to do because there's not a level of activity occurring there. So thank you for phrasing it that way because it's really helpful.
Sure.
Thank
Thanks.
you. David.
I guess a question for Peter. Do you see any of the master plan improvements effectively increasing capacity in any way? And I guess the one example I can think of is if you have more vertical transportation, you can fill and drain the platforms faster. Could you reduce the headways between trains by doing that? Have you had a chance to look at any of those? After you spend $7 billion, do you get more or do you get effectively better public space, but the same train operation?
Right. Okay. So the constraint on how many trains can use the station are the tunnels on either side. Right. So currently there are 2 tunnel tracks from the west, 4 from the east. When the new Hudson tunnel is built, there'll be 2 more. And of course, there's a 5th track on the west side, which is the Empire Line that comes down the west side of Manhattan, goes all the way to Montreal, Toronto, and goes out to Chicago. So the constraint is the 5 tracks on the one side and the 4 on the other. And we can't get it if we can get more trains through the station, it doesn't help. You can't get them through the tunnel. The tunnels are maxed out now. When we add 2 more tracks and tunnel under the Hudson River, wow, now you got a lot more train capacity, right? And boy, would that ever overwhelm the existing station, both in terms of number of trains and number of people. If you go back to the slides, we're projecting, out in the future, almost 900,000 people a day. And we can strip out everything on that bottom level, except, vertical circulations down and up. And we still couldn't handle 900,000 people in that space, as big as it is, right? Because they're constantly, when we say 900,000 people, they're all concentrated in the morning and evening peak hours. So you get gigantic flows of people, and it becomes impossible. So, that's why for more than 10 years now, the Federal Railroad Administration, working with the Amtrak in the states, have targeted expanding the station to get more capacity. And there's an engineering study in progress now. We're wrapping it up. Amtrak will be presenting it, when we're ready, when FRA is ready for it to be presented, and when the railroads are to present it, laying out the case for all these things. I don't want to get into it because the study's not quite wrapped up and we're not ready to say it yet. But if we added every vertical circulation element in there we could, and we took out everything you can get out of there, yeah, you can move more people through the station, but not the numbers we're talking about, not 900,000. And would you even want to? And well, what are you giving up? You're giving up all the amenities for the passengers. You got to put bathrooms in there. You got to put ticket offices, right? You can't get rid of all that stuff. You want retail so they can grab stuff and go, or shop on their way home. And it takes a small army of people to operate the station. This is the busiest transportation facility in North America. An awful lot of people work there. Where do we put them? If we're just opening everything up, right? So there's this balance to be found. And when you consider all the aspects of this balance, well, when we double the number of people, number of trains really that can come in from the west, where are we going to put them? So yeah, we think we have to expand the station. But we'll put forward the engineering that's behind that when it's all wrapped up. But yeah, we think it does have to be expanded.
It's important to keep in mind, the station was built for, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, 200,000 daily riders, right?
Yeah. So
in some respects, the expansion here is, that we're making the station work for 600,000. We never accommodated the expansion of riders. Now we need to do.
Yeah.
So, or just a quick follow-up on that. Is that to say that you're ruling out through running?
We'll leave that to the study that'll be released, when it wraps up this fall. The railroads will go out to the public with that study, and we'll leave the conclusions to the study.
That study focuses on capacity expansion?
Yes, it's a study of the feasibility of expanding the capacity of Penn Station. And it looks at a number of different possibilities of how that can be done, including instituting through running in the station.
Okay.
That is given a full study.
Does it also look at deep cavern?
It looks at everything. There is an option. There is an alternative for doing something underneath existing Penn Station. Yes.
Great, that's very exciting. And who is the commissioner of the study? Is it something that is done independently by consultant, or is it done by FRA?
No, the three railroads are working together on it.
Oh,
And right, and Amtrak, as the owner of the station, will be presenting the results and the logic behind it. It ultimately it is, it's their station, it's their responsibility to make the case for it, and they will. The railroads together have done very good engineering work, and I think that when the report is released, you'll see that it's been very good engineering work.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think we should open up to questions and comments from members of the public. I am not super fluent with the timer thingy. I don't know if someone, member of the committee, has done that before and can pull a timer up. The idea is to give 2 minutes per person. And while we try to do that, I'm going to use my timer on my iPhone to start, so that we don't waste any time. The first person to speak is John Barron, followed by Eugene Senegaliano, followed by Charles. So Jonathan, you are allowed to speak. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Layla. Thank you. And I want to acknowledge you so much for your leadership. My name is Jonathan Barron, and I am an interior designer here in New York City, and I live at West 28th and 7th. And I want to acknowledge the MTA, the designer here. From what I see here, I see that it's very well thought out, and I feel safe in your hands. The design details and the conceptuals were welcoming. It looks from the conceptual as a lovely crowning glory for our city. I have an idea I just want to throw out there, but I don't want to go into a controversial discussion over it. The possibility of the steps of the post office being turned into an outdoor theater, not destroying the steps, not dismantling the steps, but utilizing them in that way. And then from across the street, there could be some kind of screen. This could prevent vagrants from occupying those steps and utilizing them in a better way. I'm also an advocate of design build. I believe it is ideal for this project type, particularly for the scale of this project. Again, I want to thank you so much for your commitment, your courage, and your contribution. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And so what we're going to do, Peter and Jamie, we're going to go through all the questions and comments, and then you will have a chance to address each one of them. And I'm taking notes so that we keep track of those comments and questions. The next person to speak is Eugene Senegaliano. You are permitted to speak, Eugene. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Eugene Senegaliano, and as the only at-risk of displacement individual that was a member of the Empire State Development's Community Advisory Committee Working Group, I have a deep understanding of their terrible Penn Station project plan. I'm here representing hundreds of residents, 400 businesses, and 10,000 employees that will lose their homes, offices, and jobs with multiple city blocks destroyed by their outdated, fatally flawed special interest plan, all based on a lie of our vibrant neighborhood being blighted. But one of their worst mistakes is allowing Madison Square Garden to remain on top of Penn Station, which locks the busiest transit hub in North America below ground in the basement and handcuffs any truly significant transit improvement. New York deserves a world-class above-ground through-running station that is the center of a unified regional rail network. Transit experts, architects, engineers, civic organizations, community boards, and most of our elected officials all agree that Madison Square Garden needs to move for the best Penn Station. Primarily, though, it's only the railroads that have stated they are agnostic about MSG moving. Yet their own recently published compatibility report states that MSG is not compatible with Penn Station. Their opposite statements are disgraceful in light of such an expensive and important project. Moving MSG will be expensive, but is far less expensive and devastating than condemning 2 city blocks to be demolished only to build a stub-in Southern Expansion terminal station for New Jersey Transit that won't have any stated possibility of through running until 2080. Removing MSG and all its massive support columns would allow far superior transit planning and implementation, including capacity increases within Penn Station's existing footprint. It was reported in the press that the MTA and New York Transit shelved a $3 billion plan to boost the number of trains running through Penn Station in favor of the pricey $13 billion expansion of the hub, in part to avoid working together. Officials at MTA and New Jersey Transit say they rejected cheaper option because it fails to meet the capacity targets outlined in a federal 2017 environmental impact assessment to upgrades in the Northeast Corridor. But the plan favored by the railroad to add a new wing to Penn Station, the Southern Expansion, would also fail to meet that standard. An examination of the pages and documents shows.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up, Eugene.
And it's pretty outrageous.
Thank you. The next comment or question goes to Charles.
Hello, thank you. So it's really important that there's a way for members of the community who are blind or visually impaired or severely vision impaired to navigate the space. Unfortunately, Monaghan Station and the new Grand Central Madison Station don't have any adequate way for someone with a visual disability to navigate these stations. I'm just hoping that, is there a way that the MTA could implement the guideway tactile strips that they've been experimenting and have experimented with previously at the Metrotech accessibility lab, so that someone with a cane can follow a tactile guideway strip along, for example, a concourse, or make their way along a platform. We were talking about world-class station, but surely a world-class station should be world-class not just to able-bodied people, but also people with disabilities. And accessibility shouldn't just stop with elevators and only be helpful to one type of disability. So I really hope there could be a commitment or a way to really improve access for those who are blind and visually impaired. I hope that maybe you could comment on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next comment or question goes to Lisa Wager.
Hi, I have a very quick question. It would be wonderful if you could put clocks over each entrance, so as you're rushing to the train, you know how much time you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Any other questions or comments from members of the public? You can use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. Any other questions or comments from members of the public? The next question goes to Gail Davis. Gail, you're permitted to speak.
Oh.
Gail, you're on.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It was very thoughtful and informative. It seems to me and to many others in our community that in order to increase the efficiency, frequency, safety, and speed of transit travel in our New York City and New York State region in any kind of meaningful way for the future, that MSD must relocate. I'm just wondering, what, if any, plans the MTA or Amtrak and/or Long Island Railroad are considering to utilize eminent domain as a vehicle to encourage and or require MSG to relocate.
Thank you, Gail. The next question goes to Pamela Wolf. You are permitted to speak, Pamela. Go ahead.
Thank you, Layla. This is brief and possibly totally unrealistic. Can through running be implemented with the MSG columns in place? And can it be done without destruction of the blocks to the south of Penn?
Thank you, Pamela. The next question goes to Bill Borak. Bill, you are permitted to speak. Go ahead. Bill, you need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
I sort of had two questions, but one seemed to be answered. With all this talk about the planning and what stages, and then at another point you say it'll be up into discussion. So it's not clear to me, like how much will be open to discussion. Will there be discussion about whether to move Madison Square Garden or not? As the speaker before mentioned, that many people in the community and organizations feel it'd be much better to move Madison Square Garden. So my question to you, MTA, is do you feel that MSG must be there, or do you really think or know, or people in your group say, architects, that if MSG were to move, you still could be a better station, and a lot of people think it would be more world class. So that's my question I would like an answer to. Are in your plans any considerations that MSG could be moved?
Thank you, Bill.
Are we getting answers?
All the questions will be answered at the end of the public comment and question period. So I'm taking scrupulous notes, and Jamie and Peter will address all those comments and questions. Any further questions or comments from members of the public? You can use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. This is your chance, people. This is the first time that Jamie and Peter are in front of the community board. This is a great opportunity to actually ask them questions directly. And we're actually very grateful to Peter and Jamie for that. You can take this opportunity. Okay, seeing no more hands going up, we will wrap the public session up. And we will go through these questions. So there were lots of questions about Madison Square Garden. Let's try to actually bundle them. So Bill asked, are there any plans that that are under consideration by the MTA where actually Madison Square Garden moves? Gail said, given the need for increased travel, MSG must relocate. And are you considering, or would you consider the use of eminent domain to achieve that? And Eugene Senegaliano had a number of comments and questions regarding MSG as well, that sort of like tied to those two. But let's start with those two. So is there any plan with the MTA where Madison Square Garden moves, and what do these plans look like?
So the plan that we presented is a plan that works with Madison Square Garden there or with Madison Square Garden not there. That was very important to us as we pursued the master plan. We understand that this is a matter of some public discussion. Just to be clear, that Madison Square Garden is permitted to operate in that location by the city of New York under a special permit. We worked on the master plan to make sure that we had a plan that could work with and without MSG. And look, I just want to be clear. I mean, there's a deeply felt aspiration that I've heard from people. It's been expressed tonight. Appreciate it, respect it. From our perspective as, the Regional Transportation Agency, our priority is improve Penn for those 600,000 users and finally do it, right? And so, we didn't want to be dependent on some third party and what happens with them. And for that reason, we are proceeding with the master plan that works with Madison Square Garden in place. Now, having said that, I just want to be clear that the plan doesn't work without Madison Square Garden's cooperation. And for those that are, concerned about the impact of Madison Square Garden on the district and wishing to mitigate that impact, improve the situation, the best thing we can do is ensure that Madison Square Garden helps us, cooperates with us in the things that we've said are required to make the arena compatible with the station.
Okay. Eugene basically makes the point that has been made by numerous people, including engineers and some of the best who actually know how to build through running, that actually if MSG were to move, through running could be implemented in a very, very effective way and would be able to reach what is in the Tier 1 environmental review of the Northeast Corridor that basically calls for this capacity increase at Penn.
Well, Peter mentioned earlier, really, this is a good question for Amtrak, and they will be taking the lead on presenting the results of the study that's coming up. I don't know, Peter, if there's anything briefly you want to say, but I would encourage asking that question of Amtrak.
Yeah, I agree. There is a really good study wrapping up now. It'll come out. It will speak for itself, I believe. But we'll leave that to our partners to present it and take the lead on that.
So what do you make of the aesthetics of the station are also related to the function of the station, and the plan that you're proposing is not only aesthetics. Isn't it true that we should figure out the operations before we figure out the looks? What if you design something? What if you plan your elevators and escalators in the wrong spot, and then you have massive work orders, changes, and that are very costly? What if MSG moves and all of a sudden you don't need to do the work to the train shed to the extent that you had already designed?
I believe that would all still be required. We completely agree with you. We are working. We started from the needed function of the station, and it's a great design, but the design is really following the function.
I would just add that you're correct. We don't want to do work that would be torn out because of a change in the future, which is why the feasibility study for alternatives for expanding capacity at Penn Station has been done. We've been working on this collectively for a year, and it will be presented this fall. And we'll be guided in what we do at Penn Station, existing station, by the conclusions of that feasibility study.
Okay.
If we need to change any of the directions we've set for ourselves for the existing station, on the basis of the findings of that study, then we'll make that change.
Okay, there was a study that was actually reported a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and in this report, it basically makes a claim that there is a through running possibility that was put with a price tag of $3 billion that was rejected for the reason that the railroads don't want to cooperate. And that was a question that Eugene Senegaliano asked. Can you actually comment on that?
As Peter's been saying, we have this study coming, so I would defer to that study.
So the study that is coming out will supersede and maybe contradict the previous one? We don't know. We'll wait. We'll be patient. Okay. A number of questions about ADA compliance and making the station more user-friendly for people who have disabilities, whether it is visual disabilities auditory visibilities. I think this is something that we don't talk a lot, but for those who are disabled and cannot hear any announcements, for example, and people who require some form of mobility devices. What are you doing that we can report here?
Well, I'm going to say that this is all about, very large part making the station safe and making it ADA accessible, and going above and beyond wherever we can. I must admit, I made a note of the question and made a note to myself to talk to my colleague Kumel Arroyo, who's the chief of accessibility at the MTA, who we have a major ADA program, and we talk almost every day. So I'm planning to have a conversation with Q about it frankly to educate myself, because that concern is really important. As often the case, Peter, though, probably already knows the answer. So anything you want to add, Peter?
It is our aspiration as designers that this will be a state-of-the-art station with respect to accessibility, that everything will be considered to make it the model of how you do this for accessibility.
Above and beyond any formal public review process that we know is coming, what is the best way for us to share some of our thoughts? We have people on our board who are very concerned with these issues, who are familiar with these issues, and who may be able to share some of their thoughts, ideas, maybe what's done elsewhere that would be great to integrate. Is there a process to do that?
There isn't a formal process yet. When we're ready to start going out to the public with the feasibility study, with follow-up briefings in more detail about what would happen in expansion, if it's an expansion, what would happen in the existing station. There will be, amongst other things, a public website with a comment form that will be available continuously all through this process. And we will collect all the comments. We will give them consideration. We encourage and appreciate public input. And when we're ready to get started, we'll make it known to everybody how they can provide comments and reassure people that yes, we're listening.
Great. Are you going to install a clock above each track?
But that goes a little further into detailed design than we're ready to speak of now.
You mean it's past 30% design?
Well, it is, yes, and it's a really cool idea. I like it, but
love the idea. I want to just say, it's responsible more broadly for our whole capital program. Customer communications is it's a huge priority for us, and technology is changing a lot. So conventional technology is great. We have lots of new forms of technology that we're working on. Hope everyone here has downloaded the beta of the MTA app. It was for me, it gave me a great notification about the pet that we were chasing down the tracks of the Lexington line today that disrupted all the service in real time. And so we have a lot of work going on that, and I love the idea.
Okay, great. We had another question about turning the Moynihan Steps into a theater.
Also, great idea. Love in general, love the comments from John Barron. Believe the Moynihan Post Office is owned by Vornado. I'm not 100%
owned by
sure.
the state of New York.
It's okay, they're selling.
Okay.
It's been
Okay.
reported in the news yesterday. They're
Okay.
selling. No,
Okay.
I'm not totally being facetious, but it
Right.
is owned.
Anyway, it's not ours, but look, improvement to the public realm is a big part of this, in various ways, and components of the public realm that can be programmed. This is not the MTA. The MTA is concerned with the station itself, but lots of great opportunities. that you look at other districts that have been improved, downtown, elsewhere, and there are some great examples of the types of things that John has in mind. So thank you.
Great. We had a question from Pamela Wolf, who asked, can you actually implement through running with Madison Square Garden staying in place?
Again, I defer the question to the report that's coming out. But I'll make one statement in regard to that. There are over 1,200 columns burdening the station. 230 some of those are Madison Square Garden. You get rid of 230 columns, all right, that's an improvement, but it's no game changer. You still got 1,000 columns burdening the station.
So out of this 1,000 columns, 220 are MSG columns?
200 and something. I think I'm remembering 238, but I have to go look it up again. I don't keep those numbers in my head. And there are over 1,200 columns in the station. So there's a misperception that somehow Madison Square Garden did all of this. When the station was originally built, the old original station, there was something like 800 columns through the station. Some were removed when the original station was torn down. Others were added when the new station was built, when Madison Square Garden was built, when Two Penn Plaza was built. It's all one big mess of columns, right? Everybody knows that when you go down there. So, getting rid of Madison Square Garden columns doesn't change all that much. And if we got rid of Madison Square Garden, we'd be building something there, whether it's a brand new train house, a head house for the station or something else. Well, that's more columns again, right? We'd wind up right back where we are with 1,200 columns in the station. All right, so we'd be smarter about it. We put them in places where they're less troublesome, but still we'd have to handle 1,200 columns. So
the one point I will make just that not every column is equal to the other, and the big offenders are really the ones that are to the south of the station that encumber the tracks that serve New Jersey Transit trains. And there are lots of them because it's the perimeter of Madison Square Garden. So, there are many that are, we don't see them. It's not like we are faced with those 1,200 columns. And, certainly when you ride the New Jersey Transit train and, if you're in that particular car, I don't know if it's like second from first or something, the gates open and you have a column that is right in front of you as you're trying to exit the train. And that particular column belongs to MSG, and it is very much an offender. So, I think when we get granular, we realize that actually maybe those 238 columns, if they were removed, would actually be a big game changer. But I understand. I heard you, Peter. We're going to have a report. I'm excited about that, and we'll wait for that. I think the final question was actually from Bill Borok, who asked you, Peter, and Jamie mentioned that there is going to be a public engagement process that is going to start. Bill wants to know how much will be available for discussion. Are you going to tell us that everything is pretty much fully baked and we can tell you what we think, but in essence it's designed? How much input are we going to be able to bring? And I think you know what we want. We want through running, we want to save Block 780, and we want Madison Square Garden to be moved so that we have an above ground train station. How much of that, which we can also wait and say it again when the time comes, but how much of that is going to make it into your plan?
I just want to say, some of that, and I understand these are important, deeply felt community concerns. Some of that relates to the general project plan, to the expansion of Penn Station. We're focused on Penn reconstruction. It's the existing Penn, 7th to 8th Avenue, 31st to 33rd Street, improving it for those 600,000 riders. So lots of input for that, but that's what we're going to focus on. So the input needs to be about that.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much. I think that wraps up all the questions and comments that were made. I want to turn to my colleagues, EJ. I think that that encompasses all the questions that we received. I see EJ.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, great. Great. So we are ready to wrap up this session. I think we are an hour and 38 minutes into the session. Thank you so much to Peter Michuzevich and to Jamie Torres-Springer. It's really great to have you. Can we agree that we're going to do that again? It's not the last time we see you on a community board meeting?
Yes.
Great, great.
You know, look, we're passionate about this, and we know that the community board and members of the public who joined tonight are also passionate. We think that's great. I said it at the beginning, it feels really like it's not a conversation about whether to fix Penn anymore. It's how we do it. So we're working very hard. We're extremely passionate about it, and we appreciate all the passion that's been brought to this meeting and to the many other meetings. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know that everybody wants to go to the beach. It is summer after all. I am wishing everyone.
Take the train.
Exactly. Absolutely. Take the train. Don't do like Lionel Richie, who missed his own concert as he was coming back from Boston into New York. He needs to ride the Acela. All right, message learned. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of the summer. We hope to see you all at the very beginning of the season. Actually, for members of the committee, it will be the last week of August. This is where we kick off our September cycle. Thank you so much to Jamie and Peter again for visiting us tonight and giving us this presentation. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.